Welcome. Tonight, we turn our attention to a major development in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, the fall of the Kryukovsky Bridge. In a single strike, Russia has managed to cut what many analysts describe as one of Ukraine's most vital supply arteries, effectively splitting its logistical network in half. First, let us understand the strategic importance of this bridge. The Kryukovsky Bridge, located in central Ukraine, connects key rail and road networks that deliver fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements from western regions to the eastern battlefront. For Ukraine, this was not just concrete and steel, it was the lifeline that kept its war effort synchronized. Now, to the details of the Russian strike. According to military reports, the bridge was targeted by precision-guided missiles. Eyewitness accounts describe a powerful explosion that collapsed major sections of the structure into the water below. Within minutes, transportation halted and engineers rushed to assess the damage. Ukrainian authorities have confirmed that the bridge is no longer operational. The immediate impact cannot be overstated. With the Kryukovsky Bridge down, Ukraine faces a logistical bottleneck. Supplies that once flowed efficiently to the front lines must now take longer, more vulnerable routes. This not only delays reinforcements, but also exposes convoys to greater risks from Russian air and drone attacks. For local civilians, the destruction means isolation, economic disruption, and restricted access to emergency services. Finally, the broader implications. Russia views this as a strategic victory, not only weakening Ukraine's military capability, but also sending a message about its ability to strike deep into critical infrastructure. For Ukraine, it represents yet another costly setback in an already grinding war. On the international stage, such an attack raises questions. Can Ukraine's allies accelerate the delivery of air defenses and engineering support? Will NATO members interpret this as a turning point requiring stronger responses? In summary, the destruction of the Kryukovsky Bridge is more than a local incident. It symbolizes the relentless battle over infrastructure, logistics, and survival in modern warfare. This strike does not just cut steel and concrete, it cuts through the very arteries that sustain a nation at war. The Kryukovsky Bridge has long stood as a central link in Ukraine's transportation grid, playing a role far beyond its physical span across the Dnipro River. To understand its importance, one must consider the geography and strategy of Ukraine's war effort. The country's ability to defend itself relies not only on soldiers and weapons, but on the arteries of movement that connect the western regions, where most foreign aid and supplies enter, to the eastern front lines, where the fiercest battles are fought. The Kryukovsky Bridge was one such artery, a lifeline enabling the steady flow of ammunition, fuel, humanitarian goods, and reinforcements. Its loss is therefore not simply about one bridge falling. It represents the disruption of an entire system designed to keep Ukraine's defense coherent and effective. Historically, bridges have been prime military targets because they concentrate movement and create choke points. Destroying or disabling one can force an enemy to reroute supplies, causing delays and vulnerabilities. The Kryukovsky Bridge was especially valuable because it carried both road and rail traffic, making it a dual-use connector that multiplied its importance. Heavy weaponry and armored vehicles often rely on rail transport for speed and efficiency, while road convoys carry critical day supplies such as fuel, food, and medical equipment. By taking down this bridge, Russia did not just destroy a structure. It severed a vital link in a complex logistical chain. The geography of Ukraine amplifies this significance. The nation is vast, with its industrial centers and battlefronts concentrated in the east, while much of its international aid enters from the west through Poland and other European allies. To keep troops supplied, Ukraine needs secure, efficient pathways running from west to east. The Kryukovsky Bridge was a major facilitator of this west-east flow. Its collapse forces supplies onto smaller, less efficient routes that may lack the capacity to handle large volumes of military traffic. The result is a logistical bottleneck that slows down Ukraine's ability to reinforce its positions or respond quickly to Russian advances. The bridge also held importance for civilian life. Beyond its military role, it connected communities, supported trade, and kept local economies functioning. Farmers transporting grain, families crossing for work, and businesses dependent on timely deliveries all relied on this structure. In wartime, when civilian resilience is as crucial as battlefield strength, infrastructure like the Kryukovsky Bridge becomes even more valuable. Its destruction therefore carries a double weight, a direct military setback and a blow to the daily lives of Ukrainians already enduring the hardships of war. Educationally, this moment highlights the concept of infrastructure warfare. Modern conflicts are not fought solely by clashing armies, but by targeting the networks that sustain them. Roads, railways, power grids, and bridges form the hidden skeleton of warfighting capacity. When such a skeleton is fractured, the entire body weakens. The Kryukovsky Bridge exemplifies this principle. Its fall demonstrates how one strike against a critical node can ripple across a nation's ability to fight, supply, and survive. The destruction of the Kryukovsky Bridge was the result of a carefully planned and executed Russian strike that showcased Moscow's continued emphasis on precision targeting of critical infrastructure. According to reports, the attack occurred during the early hours of the day when traffic was minimal, a decision likely calculated to minimize immediate civilian casualties while ensuring maximum damage to the structure itself. The strike was carried out using long-range high-precision missiles, most likely Iskander ballistic systems or Caliber cruise missiles, both of which have been frequently used throughout the conflict for strategic strikes. Witnesses described the moment as sudden and devastating, a blinding flash followed by a thunderous explosion that echoed across the riverbanks. Within moments, massive sections of steel and concrete collapsed into the waters below, leaving behind a fractured skeleton where a fully functioning artery of movement had once stood. What made this strike particularly effective was its pinpoint accuracy. Unlike indiscriminate shelling or aerial bombing, this operation targeted structural weak points of the bridge, striking areas that would ensure its collapse rather than simply surface damage. The result was not a bridge that could be quickly patched or reopened, but one that was rendered completely unusable for the foreseeable future. Ukrainian engineers arriving on the scene found twisted rail lines dangling over the water, crumbled road sections severed in midair, and support columns destabilized beyond repair. It was clear that this was not just an attempt to damage, but to destroy with the intention of keeping the bridge out of service for months. The timing of the strike also tells us much about Russia's strategy. Military analysts suggest that the attack was coordinated to coincide with Ukrainian preparations for troop rotations and supply runs to the Eastern Front. By choosing this moment, Russia maximized the disruption caused by the destruction. Ukrainian convoys and reinforcements suddenly had to halt or reroute, creating delays that would ripple across battle plans. The strike was therefore not an isolated event but part of a broader tactical effort to slow Ukraine's momentum, impose logistical strain, and test the resilience of its war infrastructure. From a technological perspective, the strike highlights Russia's continued reliance on standoff weapons, missiles launched from a safe distance, often hundreds of kilometers away. This reduces the risk to Russian pilots and aircraft while still delivering devastating effects deep inside Ukrainian territory. The attack on the Kryukovsky Bridge also reflects the evolving battlefield dynamic. Rather than focusing solely on frontline clashes, both sides have increasingly sought to target critical infrastructure, knowing that weakening supply networks can be just as effective as destroying tanks or artillery. The human dimension of the strike cannot be ignored. For those living nearby, the sound of the explosion and the sight of the collapsing bridge were terrifying reminders of the war's reach. Civilians reported shockwaves that rattled homes and shattered windows, even miles from the site. Emergency responders rushed to search for casualties, while Ukrainian authorities immediately began assessing alternate transport routes to maintain both civilian movement and military supply. In a matter of minutes, One missile strike reshaped not only the physical landscape, but also the strategic calculations of Ukraine's military planners. The immediate consequences of the Kryukovsky Bridge's destruction reverberated across Ukraine's military and civilian spheres, creating a ripple effect that went far beyond the blast site itself. For the armed forces, the most pressing issue was the sudden disruption of a major logistical artery. Supply convoys carrying ammunition, fuel, and equipment that once flowed smoothly across the bridge were forced to halt or reroute through smaller, less capable crossings. These alternate routes are not only longer, adding hours or even days to delivery times, but also more vulnerable to Russian surveillance and attack. Every extra kilometer traveled increases the risk of convoys being targeted by drones, missile strikes, or artillery fire. In war, time is as critical as firepower, and delays in resupply can tip the balance on a battlefield already strained by intense fighting. Troop movements faced similar setbacks. The bridge had served as a key corridor for rotating units between the front lines and rear areas for rest or reinforcement. With its collapse, the rotation process slowed significantly, leaving some soldiers stuck on extended deployments while replacements struggled to reach them. Fatigue and morale are deeply influenced by how quickly fresh troops can relieve those under continuous pressure, and the loss of this bridge has made that process more difficult. Ukrainian commanders are now forced to recalculate timetables and adjust strategies, often under the pressure of maintaining defensive lines with dwindling supplies. The civilian population, too, felt the immediate impact. Residents who relied on the Kryukovsky Bridge for daily commutes, trade, and access to healthcare were suddenly cut off. Emergency services faced longer detours, making it harder to respond quickly to medical or humanitarian needs. For local businesses, especially those tied to agriculture and transport, the strike created logistical nightmares. Grain shipments, already a lifeline for both Ukraine's economy and global food markets, encountered new bottlenecks. This not only hurt local farmers but also threatened broader international supply chains, demonstrating how the destruction of a single piece of infrastructure can have global consequences. Strategically, the psychological effect was just as damaging as the physical one. Ukraine's military planners had to contend with the realization that their logistical network, once considered secure, could be disrupted at will. This forced the diversion of precious engineering resources and manpower to build temporary bridges, repair railways, and establish ferry crossings. While such efforts are resourceful, they consume time and money that might otherwise be directed toward frontline needs. Moreover, temporary fixes are inherently more fragile and easier for Russia to strike again. On the battlefield, shortages began to show quickly. Fuel rationing for vehicles, slower delivery of artillery shells, and reduced mobility for mechanized units all contributed to a weakening of Ukraine's operational flexibility. Commanders found themselves with fewer options, unable to launch counteroffensives as rapidly or move reinforcements at the pace required. This gave Russia an opportunity to press its advantage, testing Ukrainian defenses in areas where supply lines had thinned. In the broader sense, the destruction of the Kryukovsky Bridge underscored the vulnerability of Ukraine's infrastructure in wartime. It highlighted how dependent modern militaries are on seemingly ordinary structures like bridges and roads. Without them, even the best-equipped army faces paralyzing delays. The immediate aftermath made it clear that the war is not only fought on the front lines but also in the arteries that feed them. The broader geopolitical implications of the Kryukovsky Bridge strike extend far beyond the immediate battlefield and reach into the calculations of global powers, alliances, and markets. At its core, this event highlights Russia's ability to shape the trajectory of the war, not only through direct combat, but also by strategically undermining Ukraine's infrastructure. Such actions carry a strong symbolic message. Russia retains the capacity to strike deep into the logistical backbone of Ukraine despite international support and advanced air defenses supplied by the West. This message is aimed not only at Kyiv, but also at NATO capitals, where decisions about future aid packages are debated with increasing urgency. For Ukraine's allies, the destruction of the bridge creates a new dilemma. On one hand, it reinforces the argument that more sophisticated air defense systems are needed to protect critical infrastructure from long-range strikes. Calls for additional Patriot batteries, Iron Dome-style interceptors, and advanced radar systems are likely to grow louder in Washington, Berlin, and London. On the other hand, it also raises concerns about escalation. Each new package of weaponry risks deepening Russia's perception that NATO is directly involved in the conflict, a perception Moscow has repeatedly warned against. The bridge strike, therefore, places Western policymakers in a difficult position, forcing them to balance the urgent need to keep Ukraine's war machine operational with the risk of provoking a wider confrontation. Economically, the strike has consequences that ripple through Europe and beyond. Ukraine remains a major exporter of grain and agricultural products, and disruptions to its transportation network can quickly affect global food markets. With the Kryukovsky Bridge gone, shipments that rely on rail and road transport to reach ports may face significant delays. Any reduction in Ukraine's export capacity can drive up food prices, particularly in regions such as Africa and the Middle East, which depend heavily on Ukrainian grain. This, in turn, adds pressure on Western governments to intervene more decisively, as instability in these regions often leads to humanitarian crises and political unrest. From Russia's perspective, the geopolitical impact is also about leverage. By destroying such a critical asset, Moscow demonstrates that it can impose costs on Ukraine and, indirectly, on the global economy whenever it chooses. This strengthens its bargaining position in any potential negotiations. Even if peace talks are not currently on the table, strikes like these serve as reminders that Russia can continue to escalate at will, keeping Ukraine and its allies on the defensive. The psychological dimension cannot be overlooked. For countries observing the conflict from the outside, particularly those in Eastern Europe, the fall of the Kryukovsky Bridge is a stark warning about the vulnerabilities of infrastructure in modern warfare. Nations like Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states are likely to accelerate efforts to harden their own transport networks, aware that in a potential conflict with Russia, bridges, railways, and power stations would be among the first targets. This awareness may also push NATO to invest more in collective resilience measures such as rapid bridge, laying units, mobile engineering corps, and improved logistics planning. Ultimately, the geopolitical weight of this event lies in how it redefines the stakes of the war. The conflict is no longer just about territory or frontline clashes, but about the ability to sustain a nation under siege through the protection of its arteries of survival. The fall of the Kryukovsky Bridge underscores that Russia is not only fighting Ukraine on the battlefield, but also challenging the credibility and resolve of the Western alliance. Every destroyed bridge, every severed railway, becomes a test of how far Ukraine's partners are willing to go to ensure that its lifelines remain intact.